Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, the clean approach to building your successful business. Now, let's introduce Tom Borg and Dr. Dave Miles. Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, where we bring you the clean approach to building your successful business. And when we mean clean, we are not talking about spick and span and dust mops. We are talking about the acronym CLEAN. This podcast is all about communication, leadership, engagement.
And no drama.
Absolutely. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 6 strategies that you need to help maximize your team moving forward. And so with that, one of the things we had talked about last time in our episode was the stress of all the reopening post-COVID and some of the things that were going on with that. Give you some hints, tips, and strategies to look at. And also, we want to remind everybody that we were offering to buy you and gift to you guys as our listeners a free stress quotient assessment on your organization. So if you're interested in that, it's through the end of July. You can always email either Tom or myself. We'd be more than happy to get that to you. That's something that we were actually gifting to you guys and buying to you guys for as a help to get reopening with all the stress going on right now. It's perfect time to kind of reassess and reevaluate that. But one of the things we wanted to do is taking advantage of the current economic situation, with many companies had to lay off and furlough lots of employees. Now, all of a sudden, with the reopening and the phase reintegration, we're looking at now we're going to have to bring people back. Might have to rehire. We may have to have people that were furloughed come back. Folks that were working at home, now we need them to come back into the workplace. Or how do we reintegrate that? There's a lot of different moving parts to that. And so we wanted to kind of give you 6 strategies to at least start looking at that. So what were your thoughts on this, Tom?
Well, Dave, one of the things we're finding, business is not as usual.
So, that's an understatement.
And it's an opportune time for our listeners and their businesses to say, okay, things are different. What do we need to do to pivot? What do we need to do to change the way we've been doing business to move forward? Now, yes, many companies had to lay people off or furloughed employees. Now they're bringing some of them back. Some of them are staying at home, working from home. It's just a better setup. Some are bringing them back into the office a few days a week, and they're still going to work from home. But at the same time, the consideration is, who do we need to actually bring back at all? And if not bring them back, who should we be hiring to replace that person, or to actually look at what needs to happen in our organization to move it forward in terms of the needs and wants of the customer? So that might mean we're going to need to look at the way we service or the way we supply our services and products to our clients. So this is an opportune time to take a step back and say, okay, what do we need to do differently? One of the things we thought about earlier before we broadcasted today is that idea of that mission statement and the vision. This is a great time to look at it. What does your company stand for? What's it all about? And where does it plan to be now? Not the next 3 to 5 years, because that's way too far in advance. How about the next 1 to 6 months? That's how we should be looking at positioning our business. So the mission statement and the vision should be revisited. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. So for our listeners, that's our very first point. Is one of the things is to strategy number 1 is step back, rethink your mission and your vision for your company.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to go? I mean, I was listening to Simon Sinek had a video here recently, and he was talking to his team. And I love the fact that he was planning on, to the greatest extent possible, keeping everybody employed, and everybody would have a job, but that job may be completely different than what they've done before.
Mm-hmm.
In his industry, when you make all of your money, or the majority of your money, from events, speaking, training, workshops, and you get paid because you're standing in front of large groups of people, guess what we don't have now? Large groups of people gathering anywhere. So what do you do? I mean, that's your revenue. So you're having to repivot. So he was like, okay, cool. We got this fantastic team that's been working together, but your job may be completely different. He gave a couple of examples that I thought were very timely. And we'll get into some of these specifics about this, but just as the example for what he mentioned on his video was high-end restaurant. Typically a high-end restaurant, you have your maitre d's, you have your waiters, your waitresses, you have all these, the line staff, you have all these people that are there, and it's meant to create an in-person experience. Well, you can't have that in-person experience. So what do you have to do to, maybe this person was a wait staff and now all of a sudden they're going to have to be delivery, or they're going to have to be prep or takeout, or there's something different, but some way they're able to pivot. Everybody still have jobs and still be able to keep the business up and going just in a diverse new way that we're not used to before, and have to pivot and figure out, okay, well, how can we take the tools that we have and continue to survive and thrive?
That's right. Well, one thing to also consider as we look at our list of strategies is, what about those job descriptions? That's a great place to start. We need to go back and look at those job descriptions. What has changed since we hired that person? What does that position now demand, as you were referring to with Simon Sinek? And how can we tweak it? How can we make that better? Maybe there's certain parts of that job that aren't necessary anymore for that person to perform, and maybe they're better performed by somebody else on your team. So that's something we need to start looking at when it comes to these job descriptions.
Very true, because that's strategy number 2 is examine each position in your company. Because right now, the way the positions were may have been perfect pre-COVID. And now, how have they changed? Just like someone was talking about, what are they different? And like you said, so examine each position in your company and evaluate what skills are needed and what skills are not. And that's strategy number 2.
Yes. And by the way, Dave, with that point, let's not just have one person evaluate that position. Get your team together and let everybody do a little group think to come up with, okay, well, here's what that position has done, but here's what we needed to do. From my perspective over here, in my position, we need to do that. Someone else on the other side of the table says, well, from my position over here, here's what we needed to do. And how about this? What do we need it not to do? You know, in the past, it might have been doing, that person might have been having certain parts of that job that required him or her to do certain things. Maybe those things shouldn't have been done at all. These are things we need to consider.
Right. Because, I mean, you were mentioning this earlier before we started recording about, that scope creep where, you just, people leave and, well, I can help fill in here and help fill in there. And before you know it, and that's kind of leads me into strategy number 3, before you know it, you're doing so much. It has nothing to do with what your job description says.
That's right.
And so that was strategy number 3 is once you figure out what skills are needed and not needed, preferably by, like I said, a work group of people, maybe people doing the job, people supervising the job, people that are colleagues of the job, and that know about the job. Strategy number 3 is review and update the current job descriptions.
Yes.
And one of the things that we do when we talk about our candidate insights process, and we're talking about benchmarking a job and doing a key accountability summary of what a job entails, especially if it's a critical position, is looking at, and this is something for our listeners to think about doing something similar. What are the 3, 4, 5 key tasks that have to be done, or this job's not going to be successful? This person cannot be successful in this job unless they can do these 3 to 5 things. Because you could go on forever. All they have to do 10, 12, 15 different things. Nobody can do that. Nobody can do that. So focus 3 to 5 things tops. And then out of that, what's the most critical? Like if this doesn't get done, it's awful. Like a HR manager, HR generalist, their number one and most important critical thing is compliance. We cannot do something that's going to break the law and open us up to liability. But then the converse of that, how much time do they spend on that? Look at that. What are the top 3 to 5 most important things you have to do? Rank them in exactly like a 1 to 5 order. Okay, what's the most critical that they do? But then how much time do they spend in their day or their week doing that? How many hours of the week? Only fill up maybe 75 or 80% of it. That's what we do, because things come up. You can't fill up with those 5 tasks 100% of somebody's day, because you're not leaving any margin for the just day-to-day things that happen to come up. So that's a process that Tom and I use when we're looking at helping to company benchmark job. And that's something that you guys can think about putting together for yourself as well. So that's strategy number 3, review and update the current job descriptions. So what's the, what do we got for strategy number 4 there, Tom?
Well, let's see. So strategy number 4, we need to decide who needs to be involved in the interviewing process for new hires. So oftentimes we have one person that might interview the person, or maybe 2 people, but think about everyone that's going to be interacting with that individual who's going to be hired, and make sure they're part of that interviewing process. Now, that sounds like common sense, but too often, I hear of clients making hires when they shouldn't have made those hires without getting more people involved in that interviewing process. So I think that's critical, that you decide who's going to be on that interviewing team and make sure that they're able to be part of that process.
Yes. Sometimes when, especially pre-COVID, when we were running a 2.8, 3.2% unemployment, it was a hot job market and you were just desperate to get anybody in. This seemed to be the most important qualification sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Like, all right, you're hired.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it's not really helping you, because think about how expensive turnover is. If you don't have the right fit for the right job, or God forbid you have a bad fit for a job and it's a management position and they don't leave, but then all the rest of your team does, because they create such a toxic environment because they were not a good fit for that thing. So there's worse things than having turnover of that person leave, is them staying, causing a bad environment, and having other people as well. But to me, the higher in the organization you go, the more important it is to look at things like, what is their behavioral style, or what is their communication style? How do they operate? What are things that are driving forces that they motivate them? What kind of gets them going? But also maybe, their emotional intelligence level, because obviously the higher that you go in an organization, the more important it is to have a good, strong sense of emotional intelligence. And maybe what are their soft skills? What are the things that they bring to the table besides their hard skills that they show up on their resume? Because sometimes you hire somebody who's intensely qualified from their resume looks fantastic, but then when they get in, you're like, wow, this wasn't the guy I thought we were getting, or this wasn't the lady that I thought we hired. What gives? This is a different person. So it's hard to put soft skills sometimes on a resume and really get that to come across in the interview process. So that's a big thing. And you were talking about the interview process. One of the things I've seen that's been fairly successful, especially for upper level management and leaders, is having most of the time you have a selection committee. All right, they're going to hire. Of course, they're going to interview the person. But then, getting the people, I've always thought it was interesting. If you have somebody who's a director or somebody who's a VP, and if they're in charge of 5 or 6 directors, have those directors be a panel and have them interview the VP. They're the ones who are going to have to work for them. Having their input in it is always a plus. Say, hey, you didn't throw any red flags. And then maybe having some outside experts, outside folks in the community to be able to come in that know about what's going on, but not necessarily ones that, you respect their credibility, but they're not intimately attached to the outcome.
Right. They're not part of the political system within that organization.
Correct. So they don't have anything to gain or lose. They're just giving, it's an outside objective opinion. So that kind of 3-part panel interview process, I think, is really good for some of your senior leaders. That's just me. I love that process. And that's just something that, that we recommend as far as to our clients. But and then we'll look at number 5. What do we got for our strategy number 5, Tom?
Well, we're talking about job benchmarking. Again, that's something a number of our listeners are familiar with and some aren't. But the process of job benchmarking is where you take the ideal person that you want for that position, right, and you list all the qualities, all the skill sets, everything that's necessary. And then you whittle them down till you have what we're talking about, Dave, maybe the top 4 to 7 skill sets that they need to have for that position.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what we were talking about before. You can do this kind of yourself, but when you're putting it into a formal job benchmarking and comparison process, when you're looking at different candidates for selection, you pick maybe that top 3 to 5, maybe 5 tops, because you can get so deep in the weeds. It's so easy. And then all of a sudden you want Wonder Woman or Superman to come in and be I mean, it's so unrealistic. They have to be perfect in all of these skills, and they have to be the best at this and the greatest at that, and no one's going to fit that.
No. So what do we do with those 4 or 5 skills with that benchmarking process? If you explain that for our listeners a bit.
Yeah, just like we were talking about before, you take those and you look at literally once you've got those 5, we'll just use 5 for an example.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most crucial? Rank them. You got to rank them. Most important, second most important, third most important, fourth and fifth, and just rank them 1 to 5. And then, like you said, take 80% of a person's time in a week, in a day. It doesn't matter how you want to divvy it out, but take 80% of their time and allocate, okay, well, how much time do they need to be spending, or how much time will it take for them to spend in those, say, 5 key areas?
Mm-hmm.
And job description aside, and you can tweak the job description to more match these, but this is from a panel of experts. You're putting together like a key accountability session
Mm-hmm.
of people that know that job. And you had mentioned that, Tom, and that's the crucial thing. You don't just have one person kind of writing down what they think. You really can get some lively debate on if the job could speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of anything else, what would be the most important thing needed for them to be successful? And then that's it. You got people maybe doing the job, people that are supervising the job, maybe people that are below that level. And you have a panel of maybe 6, 7, 8 people tops. And then that's it, hash all this out. And when you get that key accountability sheet done, where you have, here's my top 5, and guess what? Here they're ranked, and here's the percentages. Then here's where it goes more from an informal thing to more of the job benchmarking specifically, is then they sit there and they take a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is asking certain questions about the job specific to that key accountability sheet that they just did. And really, and then it really just flushes out what are the behavioral traits that are needed for this job, because different jobs really do need different behavioral traits. What are some of the things that motivate a person, and what kind of motivators need to, same thing, what does a candidate need to bring to the job motivation-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Every job is a little bit different. And then lastly, what are some of the soft skills that they need to bring, or what are their judgment or values or acumen? I mean, there's all kinds of things you can take a look at, but all that pulls it out and gives you a definitive, actual, standard, objective benchmark. If the job can speak for itself, this is what is needed. And so when candidates come in, you do your pre-qual and your pre-screening, of course, but then you take the ones that, okay, well, I've got 10 of them. Oh, God, which one do I choose to hire? A simple assessment tool, and it'll actually match, here's your number 1, according to what you set the benchmark at. Here's your number 1 candidate, your number 2 candidate, your number 3 candidate, your number 4 candidate, and it ranks them in order based on, and then you can go in and do a deep dive and really choose. Wow, okay, I see this person's this, but they're missing that over there. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You're never going to find the perfect person. But guess what? You know where you can coach and develop them when they come in, because it's like peeking under the hood. You know what they're lacking and what they're strong at. And
right,
that's what I love about the benchmarking process, is because you get to get them started on the best foot possible when they come into your organization.
Right. And so this is an objective process. So once we've got that information and we put that into that survey, then they take their top qualifiers for this position that they're considering. We have them do the assessment, and we get a nice report back that shows that client of ours just exactly how this person stacks up against the perfect person for that potential position based on the descriptors we've created.
Right. I mean, in sales, sometimes they talk about creating an avatar, but it's almost the same thing. You created this benchmark on, what types of behavioral traits are needed. It'll pick out, let's say, the top 4 out of 12, and what are different driving forces are required for that would be the perfect match for this. Top 4 out of 12, and then it would pick maybe the top 7 soft skills that are really needed out of 25 different soft skill competencies. And that gives you 15 things to kind of benchmark candidates against. And I think not everybody has to be perfect, but you see, here's the range where we said that we wanted somebody at. Are they right in the range? Are they just outside the range? Are they nowhere close? At least you know what you're getting. And what I love about it is that it gives you, if you're the HR professional, you're the hiring manager, it gives you interview questions. So you can, if somebody's really strong in something, let's find out. Is that for real? double down on it. Ask them some questions on it. Or if it's a skill that you need or show that you need, but that looks like they lack and everything else looks like they're perfect, gives you questions to ask them about it. Like, okay, well, tell me about a time. So it'll give you actually structured interview questions that you can use that are validated, that you can, that you can plug into your current process to really drill down on, hey, based on what they said we needed, is this the right person for us?
Absolutely. I think it takes the bias, or it takes a lot of the bias out of that interviewing process when you have a real good instrument by which to measure that candidate that sits in front of you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've always liked about it is the fact is, as long as it's 1/3 or less of the hiring process.
Yes.
Which a resume review might be one part, the actual interview might be one part, and then this job benchmarking assessment may be the third part. So as long as it's 1/3 or less, it's completely EEOC compliant and Office of Federal Contracting compliant, which that's not an easy thing to get. It's not an easy process to go through to get that checkbox saying that you're compliant for these different things. And it does take out a lot of the non-objective biases that could be there when you're hiring.
Absolutely. So, that leads us to we should mention this now. What about our listeners? If they want to know more about a benchmarking system, we can help them with that.
Yeah, we can help them with that, or we can give them some hints, tips, and suggestions on certain things that they can do in their own process to be able to just, some things you can do yourself, some things you might want to bring somebody in. Just send us an email, either tom@tomborg.com or dave@drdavemiles.com, and we'd be more than happy to get you some more information about that and find out, if we can either help you do it on your own or something you might bring in extra help from the outside to be able to help you with just that specific selection process on that benchmarking. But yeah, happy to help and give more information to folks about that.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go on to that final strategy, and that is the idea of a more diverse workforce. Now, when we use that word diverse, that oftentimes creates a lot of preconceived notions in people's minds. Yes. What do we mean by diverse, Dave?
One of the things I absolutely love about working with some of the clients and some of the assessment tools that we have is when you're talking about diversity, you're not just talking about color or race or gender or sexual orientation or anything like that. You're looking at how do people communicate? How do they see the world? What are the things that motivate them? What are the different soft skills? What are their talents? What are the things that they bring to the workforce? And when you're looking at it, especially when you're working with teams, and that's one of my specialties I love with, is that you really get to do two things. You get to instill in a team when you're working with them about appreciating the differences of others and not just tolerating the differences of others. And that is a good thing, and how to make that workable and relatable, but also being able to kind of do a team x-ray and show it up on a board or a screen, or in this environment on a screen share for Zoom. Just depends on how the dispersion of your team is and where there might be some gaps.
That's right.
And if you have these kind of gaps, what are you able to do to kind of fill in or overcome? Or maybe those are places that you need to look at hiring on your team because you're lacking skills or you're lacking different perspectives in that area.
That's right. I think too often it's easy to like people who are so much like ourselves, but that's not filling those gaps that we're talking about here. So it's important that we look at hiring in a diverse manner. That way we're able to get the people that are going to round out our organization, so all the gaps are filled, so all the skill sets are all present when we come together as a team. So this is critical, I think, for many business owners to recognize that balance, that diversity on their team, which means so much.
Oh, absolutely. Because like I said, we talked about this pre-recording. You could have every single person on your team look completely different. And if everybody's coming from the exact same point of view, we talk about groupthink, and as far as, how that famous case study of groupthink, as far as the O-ring on the shuttle, go or no go, and what happened with that. You have to have those different opinions and those different viewpoints and looking at it from different perspectives. And like I said, everybody comes to it with a different vibrancy and a point of view. And there is, when you're talking about communication styles and behavioral styles and things like that, one of the things I love is there's not one that's better or worse, or everyone's a blend of all four different types of behavioral or communication styles. We're a blend of all these styles to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And also we need to have a good blend of people that are prominent in that on our team.
Exactly.
Or we could really, really lack some key things that are hindering our performance.
Well, and that ties it right back to that mission statement, Dave. If we've got a team that has helped create that mission statement or tweak it, and they support it, and at the same time they want to be part of that vision, where the company is moving towards, or that organization is moving towards. Okay, that just ties right back to, it's great to have that diversity, because you know that they're in sync with that mission statement and where the company's going. That's critical. That's critical.
Right. And you're going to find out where the people looking at it from different perspectives are going to help you find the holes and the gaps.
That's right.
And where you're missing something. Instead of everybody looking at it from the same perspective, you put out a product, you put out a service, you do something, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't think about that. I didn't look at it from that perspective. And then no good.
That's
so
right.
Let's recap and let's talk about the 6 strategies you want to consider to maximize your team moving forward. So strategy number 1, rethink your mission and vision for your company.
Yes.
You can do that. Virtual meeting is a great way to do that, but bring in your leadership team, bring in some of your key staff, rethink your mission and vision for your company. So that's strategy number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy number 2 is examine each position in your company and evaluate what skills are needed. And like Tom said, what skills are not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what's not needed is more important than what is. Strategy number 3, review and update your current job descriptions. It's so easy for scope creep to come into effect, and the job that you're doing and the job that you need are completely different than what's on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy number 4, decide who needs to be involved in the interview process for new hires. Super important. Number 5, we talked about job benchmarking and briefly what the process was, and hopefully you can take a few of those strategies and incorporate them in your own hiring process to be more effective. And number 6, we talked a little bit about the advantages of a diverse workforce, that we need that even keel. We need people that are in all different quadrants, that are looking things from different perspectives, to bring that richness to our team, so we have all different styles of people that are there helping us out to accomplish, back to number 1, our mission and vision for the company. So any last thoughts, Tom, for our listeners before we go?
Yeah, so right now is an opportune time. The way things are in the world out there, the business world, is to take stock of where you are as an organization, implement the strategies Dave and I talked about today, and it'll help you be where you want to be 1 to 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year out.
Yeah, I think that's really important to look at. I don't think anybody's doing 3 to 5 years out now.
Not
I think
anymore.
they're just looking at what do I need to do next month? How do I need to get through the reopening? How do I need to get through all these phases? What's it going to look like after that? And so really, you're talking about almost like long-term thinking. What am I going to do between now and December 31st? Well, what's 3 months out and 6 months out look like versus maybe what's and then a year out is almost like, wow, that's like your 3 to 5 year plan almost. When it's 12 months. So it's really compressed your forward thinking on that quite a bit with everything that's going on, especially with the uncertainty. So with that, I really appreciate you all being here. Like I said, and being listeners for Business Smarts Radio, where we bring you the clean approach to building your successful business. And remember, this podcast is all about the acronym CLEAN. We're all about communication, leadership, engagement.
And no drama.
So hopefully those 6 strategies will help you maximize your team moving forward. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care.